Thank you so much. And we are so delighted to be here with you guys, helping you to unlock the full potential of your digital marketing efforts. My name is Nava Hopkins. I'm the Services Innovation Strategist. I've been with WordStream about 5 years, one of the top 25 PPC influencers. And I also get to work with a lot of the advertisers and agencies that WordStream serves, finding what are the problems in their accounts, how can we solve them? What are their pain points and how can digital marketing help mitigate that, specifically finding those right customers. So before we dive into that content, I also want to introduce my very good friend and colleague, Chris Panetta, the Associate Director of Managed Services.
Thanks, Nava. So this is Chris speaking. I'll be here throughout the presentation as well. I've been with WordStream for a little bit over 7 years and have had a wide range of opportunities here and a lot of chances to work on a multitude of accounts. So I'm happy to be able to share some of this insight. First and foremost, we just want to make sure everyone's getting the most out of their PPC. And this has been the core of our business and the core of our success for all of our clients through use of machine learning, business acumen, and our own internal and proprietary tools, such as the 20-minute work week. We've been able to help our clients save time by optimizing campaigns, increasing their lead volume, conversion volume, or ROI, depending on your specific business goal, and overall just increase the quality of traffic and engagement going to the website. Managed Services specifically works with Google, Microsoft Ads now, and Facebook, as well as a few other platforms listed here. We'll certainly work with any platform if we feel like we can provide opportunity and make sure that we can have success there. But we do have a core offering, and we have quite a few different services that we offer within our managed services department, from search, social, display, and remarketing to e-commerce and shopping, as well as some additional capabilities. So we're always happy to jump in and help out whenever needed.
Thank you so much, Chris. And so now to the meat of the matter. One of the things that I find really interesting about finding that right customer is it's kind of like when you start a relationship, you're trying to figure out who's the right match for you. And so I liken B2B marketing, business to business marketing, to a dating show. And you kind of don't quite know who's on the other side of the curtain. So we broke this down into kind of the three main archetypes. The curtain number one, the pig in the lipstick. Maybe they meet very few of your very good customer criteria. They don't spend enough, they're not quite necessarily engaged with your core offering, they just like your free stuff. They're never going to buy, but they like taking up your sales team's time, which I'm sure your sales team loves. And as I mentioned, while they do engage with your free content, they don't necessarily engage in a positive way. There may be those detractors on your social channels. Curtain number two is kind of like the beer goggle customer, someone who meets most of the good customer criteria. So there's potential there for them to be that perfect customer, that amazing return on your ad spend, but they're not ready to buy yet. Particularly for those of you in the B2B space, you're very familiar with those longer sales cycles where it can take 6 months to a year or even longer to actually buy. And so these are not quite the folks that are ready, but they do engage with your free content. So they're getting themselves ready to be nurtured. And then behind curtain number three is that amazingly perfect customer who is super hard to capture. So today's webinar is really about empowering you to find that amazing prospect behind curtain number three. So throughout today's webinar, we're going to go through 5 different rounds. The first is going to be, how do we actually identify our best customers and coming up with those criteria so that we can set ourselves up for scale. Round number 2 is more of a business operations question, looking at the mechanics of our customers, the mechanics of our conversion rates. Round number 3, we'll dive into the actual creative. How can we leverage our ad copy to guide our prospects into thinking about us in the right ways, and our landing pages to ensure that we're setting ourselves up for conversions. Round number 4 is particularly important in the B2B space, the remarketing piece, that we nurture and we rekindle that interest. And then finally, how do we scale? How do we take our relationship with our best prospects to those next stages? So in that first stage, there are two key questions that we need to ask ourselves. What type of business are we actually after? And what type of bogus leads make our blood boil? The reason why these questions are incredibly important is that as we begin to set ourselves up for structure, we're going to make certain strategic choices on what ways of searching we want to actively target and what ways of searching we don't necessarily want to actively target. So from a kind of a customer insight perspective, we want to think about how our best prospect search and also how our worst prospect search. One really useful way to do this is actually to go to Google Trends. So I'm actually going to be very curious how many of you are familiar with Google Trends. Google Trends, for those of you that don't know, is a free tool on Google, and you can actually see all the way back 5 years how different ways of searching trend across different time periods, different locations. And so one thing that I actually find really interesting on the B2B space is that software tends to have more volume, but platform is sometimes a cheaper way of searching, can sometimes have a higher degree of conversion. So one of the things that we're going to want to think about is, are we chasing volume? Are we chasing that let's get everyone to our site? Or are we chasing value? Are we chasing the ability that maybe we don't necessarily go for the volume of impressions, but we get the quality, that high conversion rate? And on the subject of different ways of searching, we do want to bear in mind that just because a certain way of searching perfectly identifies to the service doesn't mean it's the best path to paid traffic to that best customer for us. Case in point, take this WordStream customer who happens to offer machinery moving services. Machinery moving is actually part of their name. But what we found was that the idea of rigging was actually cheaper than moving in all of its different variations. I'm not going to get into the weeds about match types and the mechanics there. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer it in the Q&A. But what you'll notice here is that we were actually able to get more conversions, more of those profitable actions out of our spend simply because we targeted ways of searching that were more cost effective, even if they weren't intuitively what we wanted. Now, keywords, targets are all well and good, but there's another mechanic to how we're able to secure our best prospects and actually protect ourselves from that pesky B2C or business to consumer prospect. And that's something called in-market audiences. This is a fabulous audience that is available on all search channels, both Google and Microsoft. And it actually allows you to actively target or to exclude people who are in market for the services that you offer. Now, why that's incredibly important. If you're a mover, you could be moving hundreds of servers across country or thousands of servers across country, and that's more of a B2B play. You could also be moving someone down the road, and that's not nearly as interesting from a B2B logistics org. So layering in those in-market audiences are incredibly powerful, and that is something that WordStream helps its customers do every day. Now, we do want to budget accordingly. Different campaigns are going to have different jobs. Just like you don't task your salesperson to be responsible for customer success, just like you don't task your marketing person to be responsible for finance, you want to make sure that you're giving each of your different initiatives, each of your different jobs, the right budget. So when we're thinking about a high intent campaign, when we've actually identified those ways of searching that perfectly fit you and your business, maybe we put a little bit more budget there. If, however, we're looking at a more general campaign, more looking to learn how people search, we may not necessarily budget as much for those campaigns later in our account life cycle. We may budget really high for those in the early life cycle. So our campaign budgets are going to shift to accommodate what data we've gathered. Now, another thing to think about is how much do our prospects actually need to make? Just because we serve B2B, serving an SMB, WordStream loves serving our SMB audiences, but we also do serve our enterprise, and the services that we offer to SMBs versus enterprise do differ. And in your guys' case, you are going to want to make sure that your messaging, your budgets are all configured to speak to that different audience and how probable it will be that they are profitable for you. Another thing, can that customer afford a long-term commitment? And are they going to buy into a commitment? Not everyone likes contracts. And if your offering requires a contract, maybe you lead with the fact that they are not long-term contracts, or maybe that you lead with the fact that they are um, beautiful, happy, healthy customers. Now, revenue tiers for prospects, I like to put these into three different buckets. There's the has the need for your product, but they don't have the funds for you. Those are going to be potentially amazing brand ambassadors for your free content to help spread your amazing white papers, webinars, but they may not necessarily be who you want to actively target and dedicate paid efforts for. Um, Limited need has funds, that bottom left quadrant. um, they may need your services, or rather, they may not need your services, but potentially you can look at testing out new products on those folks and invite them to be your beta testers. You're not going to want to actively target those folks, but it definitely doesn't hurt to allow for them to come in. Our amazing has need and has funds, that's who we want to actively target. So when you're thinking about who your personas are, who your prospects are for your marketing efforts, paid should really be predominantly focused on the has need and funds. It is okay if these other guys slip in, but you don't want to actively target them. Another thing to think about is the position of the prospect. Is this prospect going to be the one that uses your services? Are they the one that will reach out initially? Or are they going to be the one that buys once they've been pitched by their team? So you want to think about the different stages of communication, the different um, considerations that they're going to think about. And you can write creative that speaks specifically to that role. So for example, that top ad, CEO platform tool, Chorus. Is everyone in your organization on the same page? Lead with Chorus. Versus the marketing company, tools for marketers, sharpspring.com, add affordable marketing automation to your marketing tools. So we want to make sure that we're using that position language. Now, one thing that for those of you that maybe hadn't been as familiar about the opportunity on Bing and Microsoft advertising, Microsoft actually acquired LinkedIn. And there's a beta going on that WordStream has access to that actually allows you to target specific title roles within a company. And this is proprietary LinkedIn data that only Microsoft advertising is going to have. So this is, again, another incredible opportunity to target your advertising, target your messaging according to who you know you need to sell to versus who you know you need to champion you. Now, we've talked a lot about kind of audiences and personas and searchers intent. We haven't actually dove as far into when our messaging happens. And it's really important to remember that when we're B2B, the majority of the actual transaction is going to happen during the workday. This is just the nature of B2B. 9 to 5 or maybe 8 to 6 is a kind of a healthier realm, might even go later depending on our workaholism. But the core of our transactions are going to happen during the workday. It's also incredibly important to note that Google serves ads in the time zone of the account, not the user. So, and we're going to talk about this later in the webinar, but if you target multiple time zones, you are going to want to account for this when you set your schedule. You also are going to want to think about your capacity for leads. So if you are full to the brim with leads, your sales team can't even keep up with the amazing leads that you've already driven, you probably don't want to be turning on the faucet for more prospects that are ready to go. Maybe top of funnel can still stay active, but we definitely don't want to bombard our sales team. Vice versa, if your sales team is sitting there with nothing to do, we probably want to be a little bit more aggressive with our scheduling. Now, it can be very tempting to advertise all day, every day. However, particularly in B2B, where our auction prices can be a little bit more expensive, it can be beneficial to actually focus on what I like to call power hours, where your conversion rates are high, where your cost per clicks are on the lower side, and again, where you're seeing that the right leads are coming in. Um, I would argue removing about 2 hours from your traditional advertising schedule and just focusing that budget can dramatically increase not just your click-through rate, but also that return on ad spend. We also want to think about where our ads are showing. So as I mentioned, the different time zones will impact this conversation. You can actually bid up or bid down. Of course, you can exclude, but you can bid up or bid down different locations. So if you know that certain prospects are your best prospects, either because it's maybe a startup sector and you love serving startups, so you want to bid that up. Maybe it's because you're, I don't know, you have special legal offers that you can support. This is an incredibly important tool. So the bid modifiers, where you bid up and bid down, can protect yourself from those budget cannibalizers without excluding a market. So if you have a boss or if you are concerned about excluding a market entirely, that negative bid adjustment can actually protect you. On markets, it can be super tempting. And I actually had this conversation with Turnitin to market every country that you serve within the same campaign. That is incredibly dangerous for a number of reasons, but chief among them is the time zone. Second, different people search in different ways, and the messaging that lands for some markets will not land in others. In addition, different markets are going to have different compliance issues. So GDPR compliance issues versus in the States, it's not nearly as much of an issue. And then, as I mentioned, different cost per clicks with locations. You do want to be very careful about the number of locations per campaign. So in round one, we learned a lot. So here's just a quick checklist for you. We want to start by identifying our top verticals. We want to choose keywords that show buying intent at a profitable rate. We want to focus our marketing efforts on prospects in ideal revenue tiers, not on everybody. We want to write ad creative that speaks to the position of the prospect. We want to schedule our ads for our power hours, and we want to leverage the location targeting to focus our budget. So in round two, dealing in business operations. And we're actually going to start this conversation with an equation. Now, this is not the equation that's going to apply to everybody. It's an example equation, but it's the equation of how we arrive at a budget that will serve you and your business well to get scalable, profitable leads, which is the number of clicks that you need in your day times the average cost per click times your conversion rate, your overall conversion rate to get that, and that yields you your budget. Now, how we decide where to think about our conversion rate begins with actually who sells you better. Is your is your sales team the best sales tool, or is your site? So for those of you that your tool or your site is your best sales team, the customer is going to confirm their business need themselves. They don't necessarily need to be handheld through the process. And because it's a more automated process, scales easier. You can just keep pumping more leads into the system, and your conversion rate will play itself out. However, if the sales team is your best closer, if your sales team is your best sales tool, relationships are clearly part of the conversation. You want to make sure that you're matching the intent of the persona to the sales team, and the education process is important, and you want to budget for that. What's really tragic is that only 20% of B2B prospects are going to accept that initial call, especially if it's cold. So we want to set ourselves up not to get rejected. We want to have that hot date with profit. So let's dive into that first part of the equation, the 100 clicks and that 25-cent cost per click, or CPC. So the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, how many customers can we support currently without any hiring decisions? So one of the things that I find tanks businesses more often than not is not actually being starved for leads, but actually having a flood of leads that you can't handle. So if you have too many customers and your customer support team can't support them, you don't want to go out and get more. If your sales team is flooded, you don't want to put more money into getting more leads. Vice versa, you want to make sure that the sales team has what they need. Are all customers worth the same? Now, we talked about revenue tiers uh, in regards to has need and has funds versus doesn't have need but has funds. But even if in the has need has funds, different customers will have different loyalty characteristics, different upsell characteristics, and we're going to want to account for that. Now, when we're thinking about the campaigns that we're going to choose to run for a sales team, high touch sort of organization, you will want to have a demo consultations oriented campaign, which is different than the general service top of funnel piece. And the reason why you want to have that demo consultation, you want to have a budget whose whole job is designed to get people looking to demo, looking to speak to the team. The general service is more to help folks understand that they have a business need that you could be the right vendor to serve. The white paper webinar approach is particularly important if you have that long sales cycle to show that you have those interests. So for example, WordStream and Insight Partners putting together this webinar to give you this hopefully useful information is part of that business conversation. And then of course we have that retargeting, we have that enabling the prospect. Now, if you're a trial or a low touch sort of organization, you will have a trial-oriented campaign where you're pushing people to start their trial. But you'll also notice the general service and retargeting are still here. So just because you're lower touch doesn't mean that there isn't the need for the volume play, the data acquisition play, and the rekindling. But you'll notice that instead of white papers, we have affiliate programs. We maybe will invest in enabling our partners to sell us on their behalf. Now we've talked about the volume of clicks and kind of what cost per click is acceptable. Let's actually look at the conversion rate. And figuring out your conversion rate is tough because there's the conversion rate of your digital marketing media, but then there's the actual conversion rate. So for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to just focus on the digital marketing side, but definitely feel free to ask questions during the Q&A if you have questions on the overall conversion rate. So your lead to conversion ratio, odds are you're not going to have 100% conversion rate. And it is important to note that when you set a budget, you should not have any click that exceeds 10% of that daily budget, simply because a 10% conversion rate is actually really, really high for a non-branded campaign. But you also want to be mindful of if your conversion rate improves between a phone call versus a form. Are certain channels going to be better sources of traffic for you? So we talked about Google and Bing, but Facebook is part of that conversation as well. And what's actually really interesting is that while Facebook has a lower click-through rate, it actually has a 26% conversion rate. So even though maybe people don't necessarily engage as often on Facebook, when they do engage, they convert at a higher rate. And how quickly are you going to profit from this action? Is this someone getting in touch with you for the first time, and then maybe they're going to spend the next 2 months courting you in your marketing endeavors? Or is this someone who is going to make you money in the moment when they convert? And it is important to note that you actually can track lots of different actions with digital marketing, but conversions and what we actually tell Google and Bing and Facebook and LinkedIn and Quora and all the different marketing channels that there can be to track, they should only be profitable actions. So getting into signing up for a demo, calling the team, signing up for a trial. We don't necessarily want to track time on site unless we cannot track those other actions. And when you get that budget approved, it can be super exciting. It can also be super scary because sometimes you get your budget and you can't spend it. Sometimes you get your budget and you spend it right away. This is where having a partner can help. But these are the sorts of questions that can intelligently inform that budget creation. Now, part of this conversation, and it's not so much the conversion value or conversion rate, but the conversion value is the lifetime value of the customer. So the types of customers that we love best are the types of customers that are going to survive that initial agreement, that initial connect. We want folks that are going to stay with us for the long haul and have that prolonged customer value, meaning that their cost per acquisition is profitable because they stayed on so long. And is there upsell opportunity? Like, can we get this customer to stay with us not for a long time and to grow their offerings with us? One of the things that I love about working with WordStream customers is that many of them actually grow their businesses with us, and then we're able to grow our offerings or our opportunities with them. So it's a true profitable conversation. And we also have to ask ourselves, do we trust our conversion? So I mentioned time on site before. It's very, very easy for double counting of conversions, for fake conversions to artificially drive down your cost per acquisition or drive up the number of conversions that you have. Chris will get into this in greater detail, but we actually offer free conversion tracking support because we value conversions and that you have good conversion data that much. So what did we learn in round two? We learned how to solve your budget equation. And again, I'm happy to talk about that in depth during the Q&A. The questions that govern success in PPC, the best campaigns for your best closer, and how to calculate your conversion values and cost per acquisition. Now, as we're looking at round three, ad copy and landing pages, we have been talking quite a bit. If you have questions, absolutely pop them into the Q&A. So when we're looking at ad creative, the best way to think about ad creative is that ad creative is the bouncer. He's like that last line of defense, or she's the last line of defense to keep those unsavories, unfavorables out of our super chic, profitable club. And it's really important that we write engaging creative that speaks to our customers' pain points, it speaks to our customers' aspirations and what they want to accomplish by engaging us or a competitor so that we can be the ones that win their business. So definitely the idea of A/B testing or just testing out one variation of creative versus another, try including some degree of pricing in there because you don't want to pay for someone to engage with you if they can't afford you. There's actually a whole extension for this. I'll get into a little bit later, but definitely think about including that creative there. Now with ad extensions, I like to think about ad extensions as things you want the user to do versus things you want the user to know. So for example, a free 30-day trial, view the CRM demo videos. CRM for small business, what is CRM? These are extensions that are asking the user to do something, to explore something, and they're going to enable the user to get further down the path to conversion as opposed to about us, contact us, which is redundant to, in theory, what the headline should be. So you want to be very mindful about what you use your extensions for. The structured snippet is incredibly powerful, particularly if there are ways of searching that you have to get across, but don't maybe have the search volume that Google and Bing will actually show ads for, or that they're too expensive and you can't necessarily budget for it. So for example, in this instance, the type managed IT service, cloud services, data center services, so on and so forth. Now, as I mentioned, there is that price extension. Price extensions actually launched on mobile. They are for desktop now as well. And one of the really powerful things about price extensions is that they even further push down your competitors on the search result page, so it's even harder for them to get that real estate. But they also give hope to customers that maybe can't go for your full offering, but they can get in the door at your entry-level offering. So you do not have to give a hard price, and you don't have to give your most expensive price. So we've talked about ads. We're now going to transition to landing pages. And these, I'm not going to, because I could talk about landing pages for a whole hour. These are going to be just baseline rules. But if you have questions, please include them in the Q&A. So landing pages should allow for navigation, and prospects, depending on the type of business that you are, will either want to complete a single action or they're going to want to learn more. So depending on what the initiative is, they're going to have different creative. Absolutely utilize trust symbols. One of the actually rules of engagement with Google is that you're allowed to say that you're the best and you're allowed to say that you're award winning, provided that you actually have an award or a symbol that says as much. So absolutely show off those credentials. So with landing pages, we want to make it as easy as possible to convert. So what you'll actually notice about this IBM landing page is that you can explore the products, and that's a conversion action, or you can actually go ahead and book. And I actually went ahead and did this prior to the webinar. Book a consultation right from that schedule a consultation widget. So definitely don't be afraid to ask for the firm time on your landing page. We want to make sure that we place a phone number in a prominent above the fold, i.e. the user doesn't have to scroll spot. And on a mobile device, we want to make sure that it's clickable. So in round 3, what did we learn? We want to use pricing to write self-selecting ad creative. We want to enable ad extensions to send qualified visitors directly to conversion actions. We want to make sure that we are being as transparent as possible with our offering and what actions we want the user to do. So with round 4 and remarketing, this is going to apply to some or all of you depending on what your offering is. So if I don't cover your specific ask, please ask it in the Q&A. So remarketing can seem kind of creepy. It definitely, when done incorrectly, it's super creepy and super annoying. But it really is just the ability to nurture a customer through the maze of brands. And when someone has engaged with you about 4 times, 6 times, it's a lot easier to get them to convert. And we want to make sure that we're helping them through that process, particularly in B2B. So this is WordStream data. We find that the more you engage, the more likely they are to convert, and that makes sense. But what's interesting though is how you get them to engage and what channels you use can definitely impact and enhance that path to conversion. So one of the things that's kind of a misnomer about display advertising or those image ads that you might see on a blog, on a different website, is that display is just for remarketing. But display can actually be an incredibly powerful tool to blitz the market with those in-market audiences or custom affinity audiences to get people ready for a search remarketing initiative. So definitely don't feel like you have to only use display for remarketing. Display is a super inexpensive way to get that audience. And one thing that we actually found is that for about $500 a month, looking at those low budget display campaigns, we were actually able to drive about the amount of people that you would need for that RLSA or remarketing list search ad, which we're about to talk about. Remarketing list for search ads need 1,000 people. So again, like this display is an incredibly powerful tool to get that audience. So remarketing list for search ads, simply put, take an audience and layer it on top of your search campaigns. So search campaigns can be just keywords targeting searcher intent, or you can layer on an audience. Now, what's nice about RLSA is that it can either be bidding up or it can be exclusively targeting. So for those of you that ran the display campaign, you may then want to run an RLSA on your branded name so that you're only targeting people who have engaged with you before. You may also vice versa want to exclude people who have engaged with you before on your branded so that you're only getting net new. So it can work in both ways. So we just talked about people engaging with your site. There's also ways though to get your other marketing initiatives to interact with you, which is through customer match or layering on the emails that you have. Now, it's important to note that customer match has since evolved. It now requires $50,000 of lifetime spend, the account being active for 3 months, as well as being policy-wise compliant. WordStream customers get the benefit of we are a premier partner of Google, so we have no problem getting customer match enabled. But externally, you do need to have a Google rep in order to leverage customer match. But the nice thing about customer match is that you're able to actually set the time frame for customer match to nurture someone who's about to be at the end of their subscription, or to nurture someone who's about to be at the end of their contract, and make sure that you are staying top of mind for them so that they don't leave. In addition, when we think about Google versus Facebook versus Twitter audiences, Google's customer match actually matches at a higher rate than those other audiences. Now, I did mention that display is more than just remarketing, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring up display remarketing. Very good for staying top of mind. And it is good to show based off of types of pages. So if you know that you got someone to visit you off of a webinar and you want to nurture them to buy the service, you can contextually match according to the topic of that webinar. So what did we learn with round 4? Remarketing is crucial to B2B PPC. It's more than just display. We have to be mindful of our metrics and set exclusions. We want to make sure that we use existing marketing to inform retargeting settings, and we don't want to allow audience crossover. So we've spent about, 40 minutes diving into those perfect prospects, and we found our profitable partner. They meet all of our good customer criteria. They have the business need that coincides with your average sales cycle, and they engage with your free content, but then they also, as a customer, are a brand ambassador. They love getting people to engage with you. So that profitable partner, it's great. We got the date. We're expanding our relationship. What's next? We want to take it to the next level. We want to expand to new markets. We want to allow our analytics segments to tell us where we should maybe invest further. We want to maybe even build out new marketing channels. We want to make sure that we're leveraging analytics and Search Console to localize our campaign so that we can be super specific. We want to be super considerate of mobile. For mobile, you have to be in that first spot. So if you found that perfect partner, that's where you maybe bid up a little bit. You want to optimize your site and campaigns for mobile, and you want to make sure that you're leveraging those extensions. So extensions tend to be like a phase 2, phase 3 thing. Once you found that perfect partner, get those extensions in there. And then, of course, we want to scale our budget profitably. So I like to think about account management, PPC, as this virtuous cycle of growth that you have your data acquisition phase, your optimization phase, and most of the work that we tend to get sucked into is data acquisition and optimization. But scale is so super important because we always want to grow. So in round 5, we never settle. We always look for new profit opportunities. We want to have those international aspirations. Just be aware of the price of starting new things. We don't want to neglect mobile. And budget should only be raised to fit more clicks in the day so that we can get more conversions. And test. And WordStream Insight Partners is so excited to empower you to have data inform those tests. And we hope that you've enjoyed playing PPC Marketer. I'm going to hand this over quickly to Chris just to kind of talk about how WordStream helps marketers. But yeah, thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Nava. That was super, super in-depth, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of great questions at the end of this. To kick it back to managed services real quick, I want to give you a little bit of insight into exactly who we are and what we do. So we already covered the platforms that we work with and the partnerships we have with Google, Bing, and Facebook. But we do also have something that we found is fairly unique in the agency world, and that's a team-based management approach where we start off with an hour-long kickoff call with your manager and their team to discuss strategies, priorities, timelines, etc. Really just lay the solid foundation needed for the start of the relationship. And then on that call, you'll also coordinate a bi-weekly, so twice a month call. That will be the same time and day every week with your manager and their team. And you'll also have direct contact whenever needed through the manager's phone number and email. So certainly not limited to only conversing during that scheduled call. And the team-based approach we have, which we feel is fairly unique and we haven't really heard of many other agencies leveraging, is what really allows us to be successful with our clients. We have the point of contact, the account manager who will be assigned to the account will be the lead and the person doing a bulk of the work and strategy. But working with them, there will be 1 to 2 additional people. And on top of that, we have a pod-based system, an example of which you can see here, which allows us to help out whenever needed. So we're not just limited to the people assigned to your account. If somebody has a super advanced Facebook question and the account manager might ask for help, and anybody in that pod can then step up and help out if needed. On top of all that, there's also customized reporting that's even a little bit different than the software reporting for all platforms under management that can be sent on a daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly cadence. And lastly, as Nava mentioned, I believe halfway through the presentation, we do have our own internal support team, implementation team as we call it. This is free if you're a WordStream customer, and it allows you to leverage our team and their expertise to set up and implement conversion tracking and goals, tag managers, anything related to tracking, as well as troubleshooting conversions that appear to be set up right but might not be firing or might be reporting inaccurate data. For businesses with longer sales cycles, like a lot of B2B companies, we do recommend having advanced conversion tracking and basically a funneling system set up, and our implementation team here is certainly able to help with that.
Cool. So we're super excited for any questions that you may have. And yeah, thank you guys so much for attending.
You both, thank you. That was really informative. Really appreciate going into that level of detail. I'm sure it was really helpful for everyone on the line. And we do have some questions that have come in. So the first is, where do I start? Kind of a great question.
Love that question. So before you actually begin with digital marketing, you actually do want to start with those business questions. How many leads can I support? What is a customer worth to me? Because when you have those numbers in place, that's when you can know which channel will serve you best. So if you were to go, for example, on the managed services path, like managed services will help you build that. But say you wanted to go more the do it with me, which is kind of what WordStream is known for with the software. One of the things that I actually find really helpful is thinking about how much time you have to manage and setting yourself up in that way. So working through on Google Trends, reviewing the data there, identifying what part of your business you actually want to serve, and then through readings, through working with a rep, through just figuring out on your own, building that first campaign. I'm more than happy to extend, we have quite a number of blog content that actually talks about more in the nitty gritty of the mechanics of paid search. I wanted to keep this a little bit more high level. But in terms of where you start, I would definitely begin with those business questions so that you can set yourself up for success moving forward.
That's great, thank you. A question to next one. You mentioned Facebook has really high conversion rates versus Google and others. Can you elaborate? And is this being reported through the native Facebook analytic tools or a standard one across all channels? For example, Google Analytics 360.
Really good question. So that stat was a ClickSpark stat. So I can send that over in terms of it. I think it was like a 0.03% click-through, but then it's a 26% conversion rate. In terms of Facebook conversions, though, what you want to be mindful of is that Facebook actually incents you to have good conversion rates so that it can work in its automation. So on the B2B side, I would expect that the conversion actions that you're tracking are driving signups to a webinar, signups to a white paper, to attend an event, as opposed to outright buying the service. That said, videos and video ads on Facebook do have those really high engagements. In terms of the data that we see, we tend to look at data across all networks, and so we use the Google Analytics 360. for our own data science teams that run those studies. But in terms of like the Facebook API and the numbers there, that's off of just straight conversion rates. Chris, do you want to add anything?
Nope, nothing to add here for that.
Wonderful. Well, I think we are out of time now, but thank you both for leading an amazing webinar and for everyone joining here. I'll be sending over the slides and a recording by the end of the day, so do keep a lookout for an email from me. Thank you.
Thank